Okay, we're live.
Live?
Hey, everybody.
You can talk. We're at a lounge. It's fine.
I don't see it.
It's gonna happen. Oh, it's good.
It's happening right now.
Yeah.
Is it happening?
Oh yeah.
We're going.
We're live. We're
Okay. Please stand by for my technical difficulties as I. Okay, got it. Yay!
I love the little teakup there.
That's right.
So good. Oh man, that's so perfect. So, all right, a little bit of staging here. Yeah, I asked Andrew if we could add like a little tea lounge setting for you, Shanti, as opposed to our normal like bar setting, and I really like his solution to that problem there. I think it's really on the nose.
I really wanted to
just
find
a little teacup,
whatever was as most health conscious as possible. So little orange. I would have preferred lemon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the ginger.
Yeah.
I like the little ginger. That's nice.
Honey.
It's very classy. Class up the joint.
That's awesome. Okay.
This is totally me at a dance event at the bar. Everybody's drinking their cocktails, and I'm there with my cup of tea.
Welcome everybody to West Coast Live. I am your host Andrew Slack. Joining me this week is Shantala Davis and of course Forrest Hansen. Thank you guys so much for being here, and thank you all for joining to watch out in, I don't know, internet land? Sounds dirtier than TV land.
I'll take your word, buddy.
What's that?
I said I'll take your word for that, buddy. We already have an angry face. I'm excited. Jason Wyman, team angry face.
We really need
Thank
those
you for
shirts. I will commission those shirts. I'll throw it up on Teespring. Let's do this.
Was it Katrina who came up with the angry face shirts for
yeah.
the little post that you did? Yeah, those were great. I loved it.
Amazing. And actually, Katrina,
I was all in.
I think you just wrote me back, so never mind. I won't say anything on stream. But before we start, Shanti, if you have anything to plug, I would love to hear it. But I just got my copy of Resilient by Forrest and
God.
Rick Hansen.
Oh, jeez.
I know, it's right here close to my heart. So if at any time, Shanti, you want to plug anything that you're working on, please do. But why don't you get started? Let's talk about what's important to you in the crowd, and then we can go from there. Pick any topic you want to go on, and it'll be nice and loose, and we'll get as deep as you want to go.
Oh man. 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. We're hard in the paint right off the bat.
Well, first things first, I just want to express my gratitude for having me on the show. I was really stoked to see that you're doing this. I've been wanting something like this where I love it's like a talk show for West Coast Swing. It's brilliant. And I was talking to some friends going like, man, like, oh, it'd be so great to get up there and talk about some stuff. And then you just first thing invited me without even having to contact you. And I so appreciate that. Like,
well, you know, I've admired you for a long time, man. We always have such good conversations when we're at conventions, and I don't get to see you as much as I would. And you have such a different way of looking at things than I do, or than Forrest does, for that matter. So I thought it'd be a great conversation to get the three of us on here. And I'm going to mostly be taking a moderator role today for those of you in the chat, but I'll still give my 2 cents. This is mostly, we want to hear what you have to say, Shanti, so badly.
Well, I got a lot of thoughts on a lot of different things. Yeah, and honestly, one thing that's been alive for me is how real I want to get.
Yeah.
how vulnerable. I know personally for me, I've been on a really interesting journey with my relationship with West Coast Swing these days, and I love getting to still stay connected in different ways, whether it's virtually or on a local level. So let's see. Wait, I have to gather my thoughts. I'm like seeing all the different screens and all the messages.
I know, it's weird at first. I promise you get used to it.
It's a setup for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one thing that was really relevant last week when we were going to do this was talking about local community, and I wanted to give a shout out to the WNY warehouse. I know you guys talked about this last week a little bit. It's where I know Forrest and I started doing West Coast Swing. It was about 8 years ago for me. I think I started in 2010.
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember your first competition.
You do?
I did. I was there and I freaked out. I was like, she's going to kick our ass.
What was this, at Chico?
Yeah, man.
I remember you were emceeing, and you're emceeing, like, I don't know, I'm just a fan. I love that your voice is back online and we can hear your silly jokes and everything.
Oh, thanks.
You brought a fucking kill. Can I curse on this? Sorry.
Yeah, you can. Forrest says that this is supposed to be like a family show,
so you're good to go.
Yeah, I mean,
we have the 7-second delay where you can like.
No. That's
the next layer of technology that we're gonna add here. We're gonna add a little delay. We're gonna put the blur over your mouth. It's gonna be great.
I mean,
so you can say whatever you want.
Hang on. This will be great. If you're worried about people understanding what you're saying, there we go. Right over the mouth. It'll show up in a second. Resilient. I don't like that. That feels weird. I'm taking it off. That doesn't feel good. Okay.
What happened? I have a delay.
There'll be a delay. The best.
Oh,
yeah.
You know.
I don't like it. I don't want you. I don't want you to be censored because like Forrest and I. Like Forrest says it the best, but this is like, let's keep it somewhat family, but family's cursed. My dad says fuck all the time. Let's do this thing, baby. Let's go. As much as you want to talk, I want to hear it. So This is a safe environment, and everybody is really excited that you're on the show. So you can literally say whatever you want.
Dude, going live is scary, man.
Yes, it is.
You have no idea who's watching. It's crazy. Well, I wanted to give a shout out to the warehouse because that's where my whole journey with West Coast Swing started, and it's closing now. And I'll tell people, like, the first day I walked into the warehouse, like, I don't know how many people are aware of, like, how many people came from that neck of the woods. Like, just for an idea of, first time I walked into the warehouse going like, I don't know if I'm into West Coast Swing or not. In the room, who you had dancing, you had you had Alyssa, you had Brad, you had Ben McHenry, you had Sean and Courtney, Warren and Yenny, Jason and Yvonne, Caitlin Lawson, the Claunch sisters, all the Guidos. Like it goes on. And I remember walking, and this is before anybody were who they are now. This is before a lot of them became the champs and everything. And if you can imagine walking into a room, seeing that level of talent, all just kicking it and dancing together, like, it was quite intimidating and really inspiring. And so
oh, you're cutting out on here. Hang on a sec. Could you repeat what you just said?
To do it. Which part?
I think after kicking it, you blanked out.
The last 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Technology sucks, I think is this.
I know it's definitely something to adjust with and work with. Basically, I was just saying, walking into a studio with all these amazing people and talent and getting to just dance with everybody. And it was like that for a long time. And it's how we learned and got the connection and the feel. And a lot of us, I was a novice at that time, and a lot of us, Forrest and I, started at novice, and we all grew together. And it's really awesome to see to be. And so I'll shout out Warehouse and pay give a little love to the Warehouse. And at those of you who are out there who started there, they're having their closing party on May 26th. I think it's the last Saturday in June. And I just would love to see everybody come out of the woodwork who once came to the Warehouse. Even if you don't dance so much anymore, it'd be amazing to see all your friendly, familiar faces and bring community back together in that way. Because community, I think, is just so important. It's so essential. And as West Coast Swing has gotten bigger and there's been more events and more places, I feel like it's harder to be in the same place with the same people as often. So I'm hoping that this could be an opportunity to bring us all together for that moment in time as we, I don't know, whatever the next chapter holds.
I love that.
Bring that together.
So you're saying, so to go back a little bit, you're talking about all these, the pros of now. Was there anybody that you were looking up to when you started? Because at this point, like I cite you as someone to watch to a lot of my students.
I mean, there are so many. I would watch everybody. Everybody was an inspiration. I know one of the first people who caught my eye was Caitlin Lawson, because she just was so fierce and ferocious, and she didn't care. She was somebody who would let her feminine expression just like, wow, and I was like, oh, you can do that. Nice. But yeah, I don't know. It was a combination of just seeing everybody kind of one up one another. It was this great camaraderie. I know. I was working with Jason and Yvonne and Nick J and Joanna, and there was always this fun, like challenging one another in that way. I loved watching Courtney's like cool kind of hip hop groove aspect, and Alyssa would be really clever in her musicality and the details of her movement. And then having like people like Brad and Kevin and Ben and stuff, we would just like fuck around and I always say it wrong, the trios, what are they called, the three for alls? So it was just a lot of thriving of play, of learning, of exploring, of discovering. And it's something that I feel is absent these days. I feel there's such a focus on strategy and winning and being number one, that part of just being in a room and seeing what you can do at the dance, I feel is kind of looked over a little bit. It's like an afterthought.
Right. Forrest and I we've talked about something similar, and I really like his thought process on this. So, Forrest, would you like to weigh in on that at all?
Just cold, just go on in.
You've had plenty of time to warm up. Come on, man.
Yeah, I guess so. I know, and I'm Shanti's turning the tables here, which I think is appreciated. I mean, I think that like it's we were peeling back the curtain here for a second. A week or so ago on Tuesday, Shanti and I like had a pretty rocking conversation actually at the warehouse about some of the things that we could potentially talk about during this session. And one of the things that we kind of touched on for a second is this idea of like, is it your experience that's different, or is it the thing that's different?
Right.
And I think that those things are kind of tricky to separate, right? Like, so is it that we were young then in this dance community and it seemed like there was infinite possibility, and then you do it for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it might be, and all of a sudden as your level improves, the dimension of possibility actually starts to tighten in a weird kind of way as you kind of start to hit or approach your ceiling or do the things that you kind of want to do in the dance.
Right.
And I think that like the question of how do you keep it fresh, like so there are two questions, right? The first question is like, how do you keep it fresh for yourself?
Right.
And to the extent that we can, how do we as people who've been doing this for a little while kind of maintain that sense of like freshness and kind of infinite possibility? And then on the other hand, how do we actually look at the community as a whole and say, okay, maybe there are elements of that just aren't there anymore, or they aren't there as strongly, right. And how do we bring those back in? And I think that those are both really good questions, right? And I think that they're both very present.
Right. I think it's along those same lines. I find that when people are either willing or unwilling to define themselves within the community, it becomes a lot more complicated. You know, it sort of depends on the person. But for me, when I wasn't willing to decide what I wanted to be for West Coast, am I going to be primarily competitor, a teacher, a DJ, whatever it was, I felt pigeonholed somehow. Like with my lack of definition, there wasn't the option of expansion from there, if that makes any sense. Whereas I know a lot of people feel the opposite, whereas like you have not defined yourself yet, therefore, you know, there's this whole world in front of you. What do you feel about that? And actually a better question is, what do you define yourself as, the two of you in this community? Are you competitors? Are you teachers? Are you DJs? Are you community leaders? Are you yogis? Are you bartenders?
It's a very self-reflective question. Yeah, you wanna hit this one, Shanti? Because I just did some chatting.
Well, it's an interesting question. It's a question that's actually really, really alive for me right now. Because I'm in this kind of transitioning crossroad place of where do I fit? How do I show up? Because I love this dance so much, and I love it's like medicine and tribe and family for me, and I also love the genius of this dance and like what you can actually achieve with it. And as I was in my partnership with Kevin and we traveled the last 2 years, I noticed that I kind of allowed the outside world to determine and tell me what I'm supposed to do and how I'm supposed to show up.
Sure.
Even though I never really played by the rules, you know, like Kevin and I would just do our dances and post our videos, and people would respond to that. And we kind of play by our own rules. And now we're in a different chapter. We're in a new chapter. And as I step back into All-Star, I don't recognize the dance really in All-Star, to be perfectly frank. Like,
in what way?
Well, there was maybe, and you know, this might go back to what Forrest is saying of how we were when we first started dancing and where we are now. But there was a certain feel and style and way you communicate and way you create organic magic and whatnot on the floor. And also I would know the people that I was up there with because we all grew together. We all moved up from level to level together.
Right.
And I would travel and I'd come back and there would be faces I wouldn't even recognize. And when I danced with them, I wouldn't feel that same connection. I wouldn't be able to communicate the little things that I want to say, or be able to hear exactly, where do you want me to go? How can I add to this? How can we be a yes and in this dance together?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you feel the disconnect is there? I mean, obviously, since you grew up with these people and, you know, you've danced with these people for 8 years, you understand their tics, the familiar aspects of what they're doing, but why now? Is it just that these new people that you're with, you don't trust them as much, or is it that the style has changed? There's more emphasis on show than there is on connection. What do you think it is?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of what you're saying. I think the trust piece is major. I noticed, to go on a slightly different tangent,
Sure.
I brought back late night practice.
Oh, yeah.
And I noticed when we went into this practice space together and would focus and concentrate on different stuff, I could feel like the dance that I remember that I was able to connect to again with everybody that I danced with. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's something of when you switch that intention of working and growing together versus what's my strategy, how do I win, how do I make a show and whatnot, you come back to how do we really nourish and I can't think of the word, sorry. But how do we really honor this dance together? Then there's that feeling of, okay, we're on the same page, we're on the same team, and now we can be in this present space and move in that dance together. Yeah. And then there's the part of growing together. So I'm used to what everybody feels like in terms of, and I'm used to everybody's styles. I know since we learned all together, when we get up on the spotlight panel and we look down in the room, we'd be like, all these dancers are badass and I know them all, and I hope that they will challenge me and we will inspire one another and we'll cheer each other on. And now I feel it's kind of like every man for himself kind of a thing. Like,
really? Okay.
Once upon a time, I would go up there and we would all hug each other and celebrate and be like, let's give them a show. Let's rock this. You know, let's bring out what we.
Hold on. Hang on, Shanti. You're getting all pixel again.
Okay, maybe.
There she is. There you are. Okay, sorry about that. I feel like we're on one of the like a newscast of some kind. It's like, well, Steve, tell us about the election. Steve, well, we lost Steve.
That's our reporter in Belgrave.
Yeah. So, Tony, I'm going to actually field a question that goes or a comment from the chat that goes along with what you're saying. Tony Schubert says it's all about making the money now. So, in that vein, do you feel like it's become more clinical, or I suppose that the artistry of it has maybe gone away, that it is more about money or status or something to that effect?
Yeah, possibly. I noticed that as people see the structure and
we lost you again.
And how you can move to All-Star Champion. Shit. Am I back?
You're back. So, yeah, as people see the structure and they start to see how they can move to sort of a champion. Go on.
I think there's more of that goal. There's also like a validation and, you know, self-worth aspect to this dance. And I think a lot of people forget that this is an actual social dance first.
Right.
Like, I think I remember reading somewhere somebody said it's a competition dance first. No, that's false. It definitely stemmed from being a social dance. If you go to Robert Royston's History of Swing and really look at like the whole evolution of how we got to West Coast Swing, it started with a bunch of people wanting to dance and one up one another. When you talk to the champs, when you talk to the seasoned pros, like they would just spend hours and hours together just dancing and learning all this different stuff.
Yeah.
And then the competition was a great place to show off, be like, look what we figured out. Look at what we can do with this dance. Look at like what like genius can stem from this. And it was this great camaraderie in that aspect.
Yeah.
And now I think the dance part is being forgotten and it's just being used for status. And I think there's a little bit of dishonoring of the dance in that way. Like it's being used rather than respected.
Right. So what is respect? Actually, again, Sonata said something I want to field. I love what Shanti's saying, and it's along the same vein as what I've been working through in my personal journey that definitely comes out in a dance. How can this benefit me versus how can I serve the people around me? One produces a more guarded self that sees everyone around you as opposition. The other includes and makes you all better because you respect and want the best for each other. Fun stuff. Smiley face. Great. I
love
Sonata's great. I have my personal opinions about this, but how are we losing the dance? You know, what is the message that you get out there, you personally? And Forrest, I want you to answer this too. Is there a message that you have? Is there a mindset that you get into? You know, how can this benefit me? Like Andrew is saying, how can I serve the people around me? Or is it just, I'm going to get out there, I'm going to do my thing? What is your feeling?
Well,
I mean,
for
like
me,
purely in a we both did the thing.
Want to go?
No, I was just wondering, did you mean like in a competitive standpoint, or did you mean like just in the
it's
community as a whole?
Up to you. Shanti, why don't you start?
Okay. Well, I know for me personally, just the dance is just what keeps me alive. So that's just my own personal relationship to it. It's my medicine.
Sure.
And I love being able to move my body and connect with other people through this dance. When it comes to the competition aspect of it, I love using the competition to push myself, to improve, to be better. And then when it comes to the the spotlights and getting to be in the finals. Yes, there's that part of wanting to win and be the best, but one thing that I enjoy more than getting the prize or the points is, I'm an energy person, so bring that energy to a room. When I have an epic dance and it's in that present moment to moment, and we're just creating magic right there and then, and the whole entire room is with you and they're feeling that, and that there's that whole like shift and explosion of joy.
Yeah,
that's what I like live for.
Yeah.
That's why I do it. And I think a lot of people have seen that and they try and manufacture it. They try and find a strategy in manufacturing ways to create a moment that will make people go, yay, we love you. And I think there's a difference of doing that for bringing that to everyone versus doing that for your own personal gain and getting validation from your community.
So to clarify, do you think that trying to gain validation is a negative thing inherently?
I think it's easy to get lost in that aspect of it.
Okay.
I would lie if nobody's seeking validation. I think everybody seeks validation. That's just part of being human.
Right.
However, when that trumps, oh God, sorry.
Hang on, I like that you said Trump and then it just like died.
The dance.
It's like somebody hit the button.
Did it? Okay.
Yeah. So say again. Sorry.
When using the dance in competition to seek validation to be worthy of your community rather than to celebrate the artistry of the dance,
right? And
that becomes secondary. Then we start to see a different kind of unfoldment of what's rewarded, what we're seeing on the floor, how the connection's happening, just different things.
Sure.
I think. Sure. That's my 2 cents.
I like it.
What you got?
I mean, different things matter to different people, right? Like, I basically agree with what you're saying in that, I don't know. So there's a part of me, and it's just good to know different people's like sensitivities and tendencies, that whenever there's like even a vague whiff of back in my day, I start to get like a little bit nervous about anything that's about to kind of like stem thereafter, right? Because I just think that it's really easy to be nostalgic about things. But that being said, I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying in terms of because, and I think that part of it is because of the way that West Coast is set up now with like so many more events. There are so many more opportunities to get points. And yes, they changed the point structure. Okay, that's fine. But at least in my opinion previously, like it was a lot harder to get to All-Star. Yeah. I think it's gotten easier to get to All-Star because there are a lot more points.
Yeah.
And you see people these days.
Your body more when you take more time. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. You're totally right. And you see, it used to be, I remember when I think it was Lindsay who got to All-Star in like 18 months or something, or 6 months or 9 months or whatever it was. Yeah, it was like crazy, and no one had ever seen that before, and it was like totally insane. It was like, oh my God, no! Literally, I think it was actually the fastest anyone's ever done it at that point in time.
I think Michael.
And now
Michael
you see like all the time people are getting people get to All-Star in like 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, it's not uncommon for that to happen. Now, Connie Wang did a wonderful analytic assessment of how long it takes people to get through different levels. It's awesome. She does really cool stuff with data. So sure, that's not the norm, but you do see it happening more these days. And I'm not saying that that's inherently a bad thing if you really drop into this dance and say, hey, I really want to do this. You should be rewarded for that. Like, that's great. But at the same time, I do think that there is sort of a natural, with regards to the community aspect that you're speaking to here, Shanti, there's a way in which community building takes time. And it can take a second to get familiar with the people in your division and kind of move away from feeling that you have to prove yourself, which I think is really what you're kind of speaking to here. Is that the first time that I walked into All-Star, there was definitely a situation of like, I just want to hang on here and not die. And... yeah, like, and I think that that's natural, right? And then over time, I started to become more and more and more divorced from my results in terms of that, like, if I won, great, I would feel really good about winning, and if I lost, that's a bummer. But at the end of the day, like, you kind of forget about your placement a day later, 2 days later. So
Yeah.
like, who cares, right? And I think that as people get to that point, the dances get better,
Right.
because they stop becoming as attached to result. And I think that's really what you're kind of speaking to here, that once we have that like relaxation and comfort in that space and that like kind of creative moment with another person, the dancing gets better.
Yeah.
And that will, generally speaking, probably lead to you placing better if that's what you end up caring about. Yeah. So it is this kind of wonderful positive cycle, right?
Yeah.
For sure.
Taylor Banfield says, I feel like sometimes the way we move through divisions is either a cause and effect of this kind of mindset. It's all kind of circular. There can be a focus on getting to the next division over actually learning to succeed in a division. I think sometimes we don't let ourselves steep enough in each division, which I like the term steep so much for that. And I might click back to the other screen to see the teacup again. It's actually become
particularly with the tea here.
Yeah, it's become looked down on to stay too long in a division in some ways. Speaking again, like, I'm going to chime in on this because last week, and I think we talked about this a little bit, Andrew proposed like there's a difference, at least for him, Andrew Sonata, there's a difference between the person you are when you're social dancing and the person you are when you compete. And for me, that's just not the case. So for me, going along with what Taylor is saying, I don't give a shit what division I'm in, basically. I just want to go and do me and do as best I can and have a really good time. Like, ultimately, in dancing, that is my goal in general. I got into the arts to entertain and to feel stupid good about myself. After that, I personally don't care. Like, I don't care what another person has to say about my dancing unless it's like you guys, like friends that I hang out with whose opinions matter to me. So if I can offer a piece of advice to anybody listening who is feeling that, like, maybe you feel like you're looked down upon if you are, quote unquote, staying too long in a division, try not looking at scores. Just do it for at least one convention. Because I don't ever do it anymore, because those things are all over the place. They're not a good representation of you as a dancer. Look to your friends or people that you admire for advice or like support. So anyway, I want to move on to I want to talk about your views on creating a safe environment, Shanti, because I figured this was getting up to this point is a nice warm up. I love what you've said so far, and this is also very important to me because without getting into any specific detail, because I would rather you kind of dictate this portion. We have some dark shit that's going on within our crowd, right, here and there, and I don't feel that there's a lot of safety going on in certain aspects. So please share your opinions on what is a safe environment, how do we create one? Just let's get into this.
Ooh. It's a big one. I have been spending the last year or two just doing a lot of recon, a lot of research, a lot of just having a lot of conversations with many people in multiple dance communities and what's going on. And
you cut out again, Shanti.
West Swing. Shit.
I know. I really appreciate your patience on that, Shanti. Like, technology's not perfect, so really thank you. Would you mind going back maybe 10 seconds and saying again?
Yeah, I was just saying, during my travels, I would take advantage and talk with a lot of people from different dance communities, not just post swing, but zouk and fusion and blues, as well as ecstatic, and learn what people are aware of, what is going on in their communities, and what people are aware of. And then there's a cultural piece too. And this is one thing that I'm really grateful around the Me Too movement. There's also some things that are backfiring from the Me Too movement, but it's actually bringing things on a cultural level. So now we can start getting on the same page of having these conversations. But one thing that I learned is when it comes to consent culture, some people don't even know what the word consent is in certain communities. And so...
Yeah, I would agree.
So it's a lot to bite off and chew on.
Well, we can start small. So let's just say, like, within West Coast, what is consent? What is a good representative of consent?
I think consent, you can talk to a lot of different people. Consent, first and foremost, I think is always leaving somebody in choice of how they wish to be engaged with. I
love that. That was perfect. That's pretty great, Shanti.
Yeah, a lot of people think consent is asking for permission, or like always having to say, "Can I do this? Can I do that?" And and there's something that's kind of not sexy about that, I think.
Oh yeah.
And consent can be really, really fucking sexy, actually, if you know how to work with it right. It can be a great way of flirting and playing within boundaries. So boundaries and leaving somebody in their autonomy and their choice are two things. And I practice this simply on the dance floor when somebody comes up to me and grabs my hand before asking me to dance. I'll like pull myself back so I'm back in my own space, and I'll be like, "Are you asking me to dance? Like, are you asking me for a yes or no?"
Yeah.
Because we'll just dive in and do that. And there's so many ways you can go about it. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
No. I was just gonna say, like, yes. I was just gonna say yeah.
So let's see. My brain goes in so many different directions when it comes to consent. I think one thing there's a couple of things that I think we can do as a community to start building a safer community. You can never build a completely safe community, but you can build a community that can be more preventative of incidents that get out of control.
So let's actually talk about that. What incidents? What is this out of control portion? I really want to go there today.
You want to go there?
Yeah, I really do, man.
Yeah. I think clarity is good in terms of what people are referring to with things like this.
I agree. I mean, if my primary problem with a lot of the movements, especially within our community, is that a lot of this gets talked around. And I think we've done enough of that. And I respect you so greatly because you are so open to talk about this, but in our personal conversations. So I'm kind of pushing you a little bit. And I would like you to, if you're willing, I would love for you to get into the more nitty gritty, if you don't mind. If not, cool.
So, okay. Well, I do want to respect people's privacy.
You don't need to name names or anything like that. That's up to you. I'm just talking, get a little deeper
here. You're putting me on the spot because...
that's the show.
I know. And so one thing that I talked to Forrest about before going into this is how I feel like we need to, and I think you're doing it right now, Slack, is creating a community where it's safe to be vulnerable, where it's okay to talk about things that make us...
Hang on. Sorry, Shanti. It's happening again. I'm so sorry.
Perfect.
Yeah, I know. Once we get deep, it starts to pixelate. So creating an environment where it's okay to be vulnerable, and then it started to get cattywampus again.
Right. Creating a community where it's safe to be vulnerable, where it's safe to express maybe things that you might have shame around or things that you might feel makes you look weak.
Yeah.
The things that we're actually fucking human about.
Yeah.
And so I personally endured a lot as I was doing my research around consent, as well as trying to explore how I can show up in my full expression as a woman and own my sexuality and my pleasure and my right to my turn on.
Yeah.
This is something I'm like fucking gung-ho about. In that, while I was
God, with the internet connection. Oy.
I really want to go into the whole around that which we wish not to say his name.
Well, that is a vague statement. So
I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about because there's a joke, if you say his name 3 times, he'll show up.
Who?
Which
What?
I want to do.
I don't get it.
You don't know what I'm talking about?
I don't want. I really don't want like vagueness with this topic. If there is like a thing that's happened in the past that people know about, this is what I'm talking about. We make jokes and we make all these like sort of safety nets for ourselves to not deal with the problems that are happening. And like I said, for this show, and if you're watching the comments too, like you can say as much as you want, but to talk around it makes things that much more difficult to deal with. So only say as much as you want. But if this is a thing that everybody has common knowledge of, why are we saying like he who shall not be named or something? This isn't fucking Voldemort. Like, it's a real person.
The only reason why I do that is because I personally endured a lot of harassment and abuse by this person.
Okay.
I tried to help this person, and he would be all over Facebook. I don't think it's anything personal or private. There's a whole issue of somebody being accused of raping somebody in our community,
right?
And then how that whole thing unfolded created even a bigger mess. And this is one thing that I would love to create in our community is some kind of council amongst the event directors. And anybody else who we feel is educated enough to navigate around these issues. But we need some kind of reporting system, first of all. We need some kind of anonymous reporting system. If something happened at an event, that you can fill out some form online in anonymously or not anonymously, and then the event directors or whoever can get this information. Okay. And then I believe we need to have a council amongst the event directors where they can inform one another just to be aware, hey, look out for this person. Do we need, what steps do we want to take? Do we want to not allow this person in our scene, or do we want to just keep an eye on them? Do we want to maybe have like a 3-month, like, you can't come to our events until you show us that you've been able to change your ways? I don't know. There's a lot of different things. There's a lot of different strategies you can go, but we need structure and system in place first and foremost.
Right.
I also believe if you have some kind of, something when you show up at an event that just tells you things that they expect of you in terms of behavior.
Code of conduct.
Yeah, code of conduct.
Thank you. Yes, a code of conduct. This is a common thing when I go to dance spaces here in the Bay Area. When you go to like an ecstatic dance or whatnot, when you like give them your email, you just also sign, you understand the code of conduct, and that if you don't agree and follow these agreements, that you will be asked to leave.
Sure. And I want to give a quick shout out to Rose City Swing. They are our sponsor, but that's not why I'm doing this. It's because they've given the opportunity to a number of people who've sort of presented them, who have crossed those lines, damn sure. And they've given the opportunity for them to come back in, and a lot of times that has become like it was from a misunderstanding, but a few of those times it was definitely somebody who was full-on predator, and they came back in, proved that they couldn't come back, so they're just not allowed back. So Babak and Trudy, like, big ups. Thank you for handling that in a classy way and giving somebody the opportunity to sort of explain themselves and to have part of the conversation. And so that's a big part of it for me, Shanti, is like you're putting this on, and I love it, the responsibility of the directors, and I completely agree. But this is also the responsibility of our crowd as a whole, is people to not be so scared to talk about this, is to open lines of communication. So I want to ask both of you, how do you think we can do this? How can you open conversation?
Well, I love the idea of having ambassadors. Like, I have a whole vision of having some kind of education around consent ambassadors. In the fusion scene, they actually have a program like this where you can learn how to respond to consent violations and how to hold space for people and navigate and figure out what's best. And I think we have more people who at least are having those conversations or learning about it, attending these workshops, just getting education around consent culture as a whole, it raises the bar on that collective community level that you're speaking to.
Yeah.
And then it becomes easier to know who to talk to and how to engage in those conversations more, for sure.
Yeah. Forrest?
Yeah, I mean, I basically agree with what Shanti was saying, where to me, there are different levels of issues like this, right?
Sure.
There are different levels of a consent violation. There are different levels of bad behavior among a group of people, right?
Sure.
And as Victor's kind of pointing to here, there's a negotiation that we kind of have to do collectively around where are we drawing our lines and how much information is the right amount of information before you decide, hey, we have to have a conversation with a person, or you say, hey, this person has to be suspended for a period of time, or you say, hey, we just got to kind of drop kick this person out of the community because this just ain't working.
Yeah.
And I am not sure personally where those lines exist in terms of it's tough to be the person who draws those things. So I think that being comfortable creating a dialogue, as you're saying, around it is probably a good first step.
Okay.
Because taking collective action is often easier, actually, than taking individual action, which has
completely agree.
A lot of pressure associated with it. Yeah. So just ways that we can kind of break down barriers to communication, like Shanti is talking about, I think is in general a really good idea. And whether that's with like a formalized, I don't know, consent squad or whatever it might be, or it's more of a loose conversational style, the way that we've been doing it so far, is I think an open question. I'm not 100% sure which one of those is actually more effective.
I wouldn't say that any one of them is more effective. It's definitely according to the
some combination.
Yeah, exactly. But I will also say, oh, please, Shanti, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to emphasize that we have so much focus on this form of this kind of punitive justice format. We're like stuck in this paradigm of we have to somehow look to the predator and punish him or her, whoever it is, somehow.
Right.
And what I really would love to put more focus on, how I'd like us to shift, is how we can tend to those who have been violated.
Right.
So much of like, I'm gonna avenge or whatever it is, and I'd love like, as somebody who has experienced, who's been in the situation, it doesn't really make, not all the time makes you feel better knowing that somebody is being punished for something, for the pain that they've caused you.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. So one thing that I would love to put more emphasis around is how we contend and support those who have been hurt, who have been violated, and ask what they need first.
Sure.
Like, do you want this person removed from the event? Will that make you feel safer? Do you want us to talk to this person? Do you just need space? Do you just need somebody to hear what your experience is? And then we'll just let the event director know, and we'll just be aware of it. Like, there's so many different steps you can take, but a lot of people kind of overlook the person who actually has been hurt, and they just go to how to remove or how to punish or how to justify this thing. And I want us to put more attention and focus on those who actually have been hurt, because lots of times when they don't have the holding in that, they feel shame, they remove themselves, and they never come back, and then they just are carrying this thing.
Yeah, sure.
And so that's a huge important piece. I think I want to make sure that we bring voice to.
I agree. And along those lines, for me, I like the term conversation before consequences, because yes, we absolutely need to give attention and voice to people who have gone through terrible things, regardless of what they are. But also, there's a lot of miscommunication as to what is and is not good and bad, and who was violated in this way. I've been on both ends of that. Like, there's a lot of misunderstanding. I mean, there's obvious things like, hey, 41 women came forward and said Harvey Weinstein did X. Like, yeah, okay, we should fucking, you don't get a production company anymore. Fine. But even there was evidence and that sort of thing. What I'm saying is like, not only should we give voice, but we need to have a real conversation before punishment is exacted. You know, you should talk to the person who is the accuser and the accused, and because the best thing you can do for somebody isn't necessarily like kick them out unless they're just a monster. It's educate them. You know, one of the biggest problems in our country, especially, is this idea of, you know, you're wrong if you don't do it this way. When it's just everybody is so damn different, and we need to learn how to be different, and we need to learn how to be open-minded and educate one another on how to fucking deal with each other, because we're already way past population density of what we can handle. You know? The average person can handle about 10 people in their life on the whole. And I'll just speak for myself. I have like 5 people that I absolutely love. These are my best friends. Then I have my friends. Then I have my acquaintances. And then there's just fucking people I come to on the street. After that, to understand even the small numbers of the West Coast crowd and try to like understand the 10,000 to 20,000 different mindsets that you may encounter, that's mind-boggling. Never mind the millions of people you'll meet in your life. So, to bring it back, I'm advocating conversation more than absolute anything. I want to learn about everybody so we can actually make informed decisions. Forrest, I know you've got opinions on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you guys are highlighting some really good things here. And everything that Shanti was speaking to was, I think, really relevant and good. For me, a lot of it is about how do we go about kind of adjusting the volume knob on sort of what's seen as acceptable behavior.
Yeah.
Particularly around issues related to consent. Because I do think that particularly women, but also men. I mean, so here's a good example.
Yeah.
So Benji was at the warehouse over the weekend, and he taught this great workshop, and he was out social dancing. And Benji is often pretty careful about social dancing because he's a professional dancer.
Yep.
His body is his instrument. You know, you just have to be conscious about that. But he was out there just crushing it socially, and it was awesome to see him dance because that dude puts as much effort into his social dances as he does into a spotlight with Sarah or Victoria or any other champion. He goes max effort. It's great. And I was sitting right there. I was actually DJing. And it was really crazy to watch the sea of follows just mug him. Like just straight up mug the guy. Like literally I saw people, I swear to God, people who have never met him in a day in their life, never met him before, like run across a floor and just like bear hug him before being like, can you dance with me?
I wonder what it's like to be on TV. It was some
really weird shit. Yeah, it was some really weird shit. And I think that happens even more often, generally speaking, to women in this community than to men, but it definitely happens to men. And we just can't allow that to be a thing.
Yeah.
You know, we have to kind of hold people to a higher standard than that as a community. And I think that, you know, I think there is an ongoing dialogue here, and I think that it's a dialogue that's been valuable. And I think that some of the issues that have happened in the past have really kind of shown a light on the fact that we should be having conversations like that. So I do think that that's a really powerful thing. I'm going to slightly steer here. I'm going to do a little baby steer, because Shanti said something when we were talking about on Tuesday, and we're kind of towards our last like 10-ish minutes here, that I thought was pretty great and pretty powerful. So I'm going to kind of lean into it and see if she wants to lean into it too. I don't know if you want to actually talk about this or not, Shanti, but kind of accompanying that idea of what's permissible to express, because on one side of the spectrum there's some behaviors.
Okay.
No, seriously.
No, this is great. Yeah.
Shit. And we're saying, hey, these are problematic behaviors. You know, grabbing you and pulling you onto the floor instead of asking you to dance.
Right.
That's a problematic behavior. We're asking that people not express that as much. We're asking that they censor themselves in a certain kind of way. On the other hand of the spectrum, there are things that I think that people are... So that's something that we could say that maybe we're a little under-censored about.
Yeah.
Other side of the spectrum, there are things that I think that we're over-censored about. And Shanti was kind of referring to those a little bit earlier in this conversation around issues related to vulnerability.
Sure.
And we kind of over-censor that instinct to have a bad day publicly is kind of the way that Shanti put it in the conversation on Tuesday, because there's a lot of judgment that's associated with that.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to judge than it is to empathize, generally speaking. So I'm not sure if there's really a how here. I was just sort of hoping that if you're open to it, Shanti, that you would be willing to kind of share your experience here with regards to that, and then we could kind of talk about it or talk about kind of ways to make that more comfortable for people. Because I think that you said something that I thought was really useful, that most of the time when people are having a bad day in this community, you don't really know that they're having a bad day. Like, we're not really good at kind of expressing the moments when we're less than 100%.
Right.
And I'm not sure if there's a smooth way to get better at doing that or to create a safer environment for doing that, for people who want to feel free to express that. But I think that it's worth having a conversation about, because that conversation exists at both ends of the spectrum, right? There are behaviors that we're like, you should tamp that one a little bit. And there are behaviors where it's like, hey, we should be more free to do this. And I think the balance between those two things is really interesting.
Yeah.
So that was a question or not, per se. It wasn't really framed as a question, but I'm willing to kind of take that wherever you want to take it.
Yeah, I could go a couple of different directions with that. I know when I was talking to you about that, I was thinking about my experience, where I endured a lot of my own form of violation in my travels dancing, to the point that it caused me some trauma and depression, honestly. And I wasn't sure how I was able to show up with that being my truth. And I really didn't know like who in our community was capable of holding that. It's hard stuff. It's intense stuff. And I think, I'm just going to speak as a woman, we endure a lot of things that I don't know people are aware of, and that it's okay to talk about. So, I've recalled sometimes talking about more feminine female things and everybody kind of getting like, oh, okay, whatever. And I go like, okay, so that's not space for it. And it's interesting because, especially when it comes to matters of sex, everybody's doing it and everybody is like engaging it and talking about it behind closed doors.
Yeah. Hang on.
The crunchy.
There you are. Okay.
Good.
You came back in when you said crunchy bits.
Yeah, I like the crunchy bits.
Shit.
Somebody make me a shirt that says crunchy bits.
All right, so we
Katrina
have,
Blackwell,
what was
I'm
it?
looking at you.
We have geriatric hips, we have the
hips.
angry face, and we have crunchy bits.
Yeah, hashtag crunchy bits. It'll be worldwide trending.
Yeah, so that basically when you and I were talking about this, I was coming from a place of how to, especially as a pro, like as somebody who has been teaching professionally, like how can I still show up as a human who has these experiences, and still like, be the person that everybody sees me to be in this community. Like, will you love me less? Is my worth to the community less if I show you that I'm not perfect and I have these problems, and I'm having a hard time managing how to be with that.
Yeah.
And again, that's what I think is really great about what you're doing here, Slack, is so we start having those conversations, because I think the only places we really do have those conversations are when people go up to their hotel rooms and have a drink.
Yeah.
And sometimes, depending on the crowd.
And everybody's having the same damn conversation.
Right. Yeah, I don't know, Forrest, if that was the direction you were gearing towards, because you can go in other ways in terms of it.
If you're watching Reset, just reset the damn thing. It'll happen. It works. I can't stand this stupid thing. we're gonna move on to Twitch, man. It's gonna happen. I don't care if they have.
Wow.
It's the stablest platform. It does not drop, and I want to do episodes that are longer than an hour at some point, especially with things like this. This deserves to have as much conversation. Yeah, this is a topic somewhere in here that we will revisit again. See,
I'm like, there's so many things I don't even know how to dive into with the time.
Yeah.
Boundary we have with it.
I mean, technically, we're at time. We're going to go a couple minutes over, just so we can kind of wrap up. But those of you that are watching, there's a magical thing called Twitch. Go make an account now. It links with your Facebook account. It's free. It's a little annoying to sign up, but I'm going to start employing that because I'm sick of having these things. The Facebook algorithm basically screws you at about an hour. And I really want these conversations to be, to not be interrupted and to to archive them a little easier.
Screws you at about.
Whoa! I can hear myself. I don't like it.
Sorry.
I just heard "screws you" from myself, and that's. If you've never told yourself to go screw yourself, it's a weird experience. Okay, so I mean, we've talked to. That threw me off. Okay. I'm just looking through the comments now to see if I can get back on. I love when the notification in the comments is Forrest Hansen is watching. What?
I am watching.
You are? Well, yeah.
Yeah, I'm watching. Yeah, exactly. I've got the binos on, the whole thing. Yeah, I think that the last thing that was kind of said was how Shanti kind of concluded her thought there.
Yeah.
About going through a period where you kind of ask yourself your question: can you be yourself inside of this container of people if yourself feels not so great for whatever reason, feels very vulnerable, feels hurt, feels wounded, feels traumatized, place wherever you want to place yourself on that kind of on that spectrum.
Yeah.
It's, and I think that's a tough question, and I think there are kind of two questions to follow up for that. And the first is how you were asking, finding a person to hold space inside of this community.
Yep.
Where you're like, you weren't sure if you could find that person who could hold the space for those things inside this community. And I think that maybe for better or worse, my kind of first question with regards to that is like, should you be able to find that person inside of a dance community? Like, is that where we should look for that person? And because there are lots of friends that I interact with that I would feel comfortable expressing like a lot of vulnerability to. But there, for me, are people who've transitioned from like dance friends or like people I know inside West Coast to like really close, intimate friends of mine. And I'm not sure if I will ever feel like I can walk into a ballroom of people and be my 100% unadulterated self with all 800 of them. I'm not sure if that's like a real thing to aspire to, if that kind of makes sense. So I don't know. I guess I was just sort of wondering if you had a thought on that. Is that something that you think we should be aspiring to, or is it okay for that to really just happen more with your intimate buddies?
I feel, as somebody who's more of a leader in this community, part of me feels like it's important to show up in my raw truth, in my raw vulnerability, because I know I'm not alone, and I have a lot of people. I put myself out there as I'm a safe person. I'll hold space for you, and I hear from so many people, so many people in this community are going through so much that we're not aware of.
Sure.
And it's crazy how many people are having same things, and yet we're not finding places where we can come together and just say, I see you, I empathize with you, I like your story is my story, or like, you're not alone in this. And yet we're so scared to reveal that. So in some aspects, I try and be a little bit of like a lighthouse in that way of going like, hey, I know depression. Hey, I know abuse and assault. I know like the ups and downs of trying to navigate a whole your self-talk, and all these things, right? And I think the more we put it out there, the less scary it is to be like, hey, I have this thing. I think the oppression of the emotion is what makes it bigger and feels like it could be out of control, you know?
Yep. I agree. I don't need to add anything to that. That was perfect. And I pretty much just agree entirely with what you said. I guess what I would add is, again, this is a cultural thing, you know, with West Coast is still a very Western Americanized thing, you know, and no matter where you are in the world, it's still kind of the same thing. So there's this idea, at least from in my experience, of like, you're going to be the best, and that's a very fucking specific thing. But at the same time, you can be a flower, but you have to do this thing like this. It's a lot of mixed messages, but it's a lot of expectations. And so until we're able to educate everybody, and I'm talking like for me, it would be your kids, but that's a whole other thing, about we're all cool, and you don't need to work so damn hard to prove that, and we're all wonderful fucking people. Or maybe you're not. Maybe you suck, and maybe we have to make consequences for you. You know, maybe we have to talk about your damn behavior and not sweep it under the rug. The point being is hiding things has never worked in any situation. Like, it always comes out, and there's always a problem, you know. And I'm not saying like go into a ballroom and air your dirty laundry, but if there is an issue with something as severe as, like, we know there's an abuser in the crowd who is like emotionally or physically abusing our people, let's fucking talk about it. Someone died in our crowd and I really miss them. Let's talk about it, you know? I'm having a hard day, and, man, I'm nervous about my fucking competition. Let's talk about it, man. Like, it doesn't need to be a big to-do. We can just open lines of communication. So, and really, if there's anything that I'm hoping to do with this talk show, we only get to do once a week for an hour so far. I'm trying to change that. If there's anything that I'm trying to do with this, it is open conversation. And unfortunately, we do have to be done. And I can't thank you guys enough for being...
Can I say 2 cents off that before you...
Of course, yeah. Yes, please.
I think just something to be able to navigate. If you are having some kind of, thing that you need to express, it's always great to just always approach somebody and say, like, hey, I'm needing some extra support. Are you available for that? You know, again, practicing that form of consent, instead of just putting your stuff on somebody and all of a sudden it's like, wow, I was going to go dance and now I'm like having to process this thing with this person. Like, it's always good to just check in. Do you have space? Do you have the capacity to do that? Leaving them in choice.
Yeah.
And then also in general, I love us to practice being able to accept a no, whether it's a no to a dance or a no to hold space. It's like, I'm not available right now, but maybe later, or I just don't feel like I'm the person to do that for you, and that we can like receive that.
Yeah. Well said.
Well said.
So those in the chat, those of you watching, thank you so much for joining us. Again, thank you so much, Shantala. You're incredible. I'm so glad that you're a part of this. And Forrest, as always, man, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I love you both very much. And again, a shout out to our sponsor, Rose City Swing. If you're interested in being a sponsor, shoot me an email. I'm now finally able to get back to people. Forrest just released his book. I saw the pictures on Instagram of the signing. Resilient by Rick Hansen and Forrest Hansen. I got my copy right here. But that's going to be it from us for today, you guys. Thank you so much on behalf of my guests and on behalf of our community. Go have the best day that you've ever had, and we'll see you again on West Coast Live.